The fire crackled softly while snow danced outside the window, cocooning us in silence. It was our anniversary, and he brought me to this cabin nestled in the mountains, away from the city, from noise, from routine. I thought this would be a moment of reconnection, a way to breathe again as a couple. What I didn't realize was how different this night would be, how layered his intentions were. There was a stillness to him, like he was waiting for something much deeper than dinner. His every move was slow and intentional. The way he adjusted the fire, touched my hair, poured my wine. It wasn't casual. It was intimate, weighted. I couldn't name the emotion, but something about the room felt charged. The emotional slow burn had begun, even if I didn't know it yet. He was watching me, not with hunger, but with admiration, almost reverence. It was the kind of presence that makes you feel seen and slightly exposed. I asked him what was on his mind, and he smiled softly. "Do you remember what you once said about opening new doors?" My stomach flipped, but I nodded. It had been a passing comment during a late-night talk about desire, boredom, and love after years together. I didn't think he remembered. He poured more wine, and before I could ask anything else, there was a knock at the door. I turned toward the sound, confused. We were in the middle of nowhere. No signal. No neighbors. He stood and walked toward it with a calm that made my chest tighten. The door opened, and she stepped in, quiet, elegant, and completely unbothered by the snow clinging to her coat. This wasn't just a guest. This was the moment the forbidden confession began, and I wasn't ready for how it would shift everything. She walked in without a word. No umbrella, no suitcase, just presence. There was nothing theatrical in her arrival, yet everything about it felt calculated. Her eyes didn't wander. They went straight to mine. Not invasive, not shy, just aware. She was here for something, and I was beginning to realize so was I. The psychological seduction had already begun, and I was caught in its stillness before I could question it. My husband offered her a glass of wine, as if they had rehearsed this. And maybe they had. I watched as he moved between us, pouring, smiling, saying nothing of substance, but everything in his tone hinted at control. This wasn't impulsive. This was emotional choreography. I felt like a character in a story I didn't write, yet somehow I had authored it with that one comment months ago. And now, the door was open literally and metaphorically. She didn't take my place. She didn't sit too close. But her presence filled the room in a way that shifted the air. I looked at him, then at her. And I realized they were both waiting, not pushing, not testing, just holding space. A forbidden desire was blooming quietly, and I was the one holding the key to whatever came next. I thought I'd be scared. I wasn't. I was curious. The silence between us thickened, and I became hyper-aware of every breath, every movement. She brushed snow from her sleeve. He adjusted a candle, and I sat there, wine in hand, heart pounding with something dangerously close to excitement. This wasn't cheating. It was something more intricate, a triangle intimacy that asked for permission instead of stealing it. The knock had happened. She had entered, but the real door opening was the one inside me. We sat in the quiet for longer than I expected. The kind of silence that wasn't awkward, it was loaded, with intention, with observation. She didn't try to charm me. She didn't perform. She simply existed in the space like she'd always belonged. My husband wasn't nervous either. He was present, grounded, almost proud. And I realized this was his gift. Not her. The space. The choice. The chance to rediscover something lost. This was a slow burn drama unfolding in real time. My thoughts raced. Was this emotional cheating? Was it a test? But the absence of pressure made it harder to resist. She never looked at him the way I feared. She looked at me, respectfully, gently, as if waiting for a signal I didn't know how to give. Her presence wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid of what would happen. I was afraid of missing it. The fire popped and the scent of wine filled the air. She laughed at something subtle, and for a moment, we were just three people sharing warmth in a cabin. But I could feel the shift under the surface. That forbidden connection had formed without touch, without confession, just awareness. And it was that restraint, that delicate restraint, that made me feel more alive than I had in years. She stood to remove her coat, revealing a softness in her posture that mirrored how I felt inside, unguarded, unsettled, but open. And when my husband looked at me, his gaze wasn't questioning. It was reverent. This wasn't about physical seduction. It was about emotional surrender. He had handed me the gift, and I was the only one who could unwrap it, slowly, intentionally, on my own terms. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. A new rhythm entered the space, like the moment between inhale and exhale. She moved closer, not to invade, but to align. Her wine glass touched mine when she sat. Her knees, angled just enough to face me. There was no seduction in her body language, but something deeper. A shared emotional awareness, as if we were both slowly waking up to something we didn't know we needed. My husband sat between us now, no longer a bridge, but a witness. His hand touched my back as he spoke softly about our anniversary, but my focus had shifted. Her presence had reshaped the room's center. She wasn't replacing anything. She was expanding it. The intimacy wasn't between them. It was radiating from all directions. This wasn't betrayal. It was a real forbidden story unfolding in real time. Our conversations stayed light. Movies, travel, memories, but every word was soaked in tension. Not discomfort. Curiosity. She looked at me as if seeing something I hadn't shown in years. And when I spoke, she truly listened. I felt something move in me. A part of myself I had left behind was now sitting beside me, smiling through someone else's eyes. The warmth of the fire seemed to follow our rhythm. The light dimmed. No one stood. No one gave instructions. But we all felt it, the shift. The moment when three hearts find the same frequency, and silence becomes the most honest language in the room. This was no longer about her, or him. It was about me finally letting myself be felt. She leaned back slightly, her hand resting gently on the blanket between us. I noticed it before I acknowledged it. The space between her fingers and mine was intentional, close, but not touching. A symbol of what this night had become. An open door, patiently waiting. And somehow, that simple gesture said more than any kiss could. It wasn't lust. It was permission. And permission is where real forbidden confessions begin. I didn't pull away. I didn't move forward either. I just existed there, breathing, trembling, steady. My husband noticed. He didn't interrupt. He didn't encourage. He simply watched with the same reverence he'd carried since she arrived. This was no longer his gift to give. It was mine to receive or not. And that balance of consent, emotion, and intimacy made the moment feel powerful instead of provocative. Our fingers eventually touched. Barely. A soft, almost accidental brush, but we both knew it wasn't. It was a silent agreement, a quiet yes without the sound. And in that moment, I felt something unfold inside me. Not shame, not fear, but recognition. She wasn't replacing me. She was seeing me. And that kind of visibility, after years of fading behind responsibilities and routines, felt divine. I looked into her eyes, and what I saw wasn't seduction. It was reflection. We were different, and yet somehow mirrors. Two women who had stopped expecting to feel new again. This wasn't just a story of emotional cheating or triangle intimacy. It was a rediscovery of my own sensual identity. And without a word, I let go of the part of me that kept asking permission to feel alive. When I leaned in, it wasn't dramatic. There was no music, no signal. It was instinct, quiet and true. My lips brushed her softly, just enough to acknowledge the invitation we'd both accepted. She didn't rush. She didn't pull. She responded with a stillness that made my whole body buzz. This wasn't just touch. It was trust. It was the true essence of sensual storytelling. Intimate, intentional, unforgettable. I felt his hand on my back again, grounding me. I turned toward him without leaving her. And there it was, triangle intimacy in its most delicate form. Not chaos, not conflict, but connection. We weren't tangled bodies. We were layered emotions, rediscovering a rhythm that had long been silenced. His lips found mine, and then hers. And suddenly, time didn't feel linear anymore. It felt expansive. Like I had never fully existed until this exact moment. They didn't take control. They followed mine. Every move, every breath, every whisper in the firelight was shaped by my pace. That was the real gift. Not the presence of another woman, not the fantasy of three, but the sacred space to choose, to lead, to feel. This wasn't about betrayal or infidelity. It was about emotional sovereignty, a sensual reclaiming of my voice. And when it was over, if you could even call it that, we didn't speak. We just lay there, tangled in warmth, in silence, in presence. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. I could feel theirs, too. And more than anything, I felt whole. The kind of wholeness you can't explain. You just know. I didn't understand the gift when it arrived. But the moment she walked in, I began to understand myself. The next morning, the snow was still falling, quiet, patient, like nothing had happened. But everything had. I walked outside barefoot for a moment, just to feel the cold bite my skin, to remind myself that I was awake. That it was real, that I was real. The emotional tension had passed, but the clarity remained. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders without saying a word. She stood at the window, her breath fogging the glass, tracing soft circles with her fingertips. No one needed to ask what this meant. It wasn't about the act, it was about the shift. Something in me had opened. Something in us had grown, not just in desire, but in truth. It wasn't a night of cheating. It was a night of rediscovery. I didn't look back with shame. I didn't try to label what we were. There was no need. The moment had done what it came to do. It had shown me who I was beneath the expectations, beneath the roles, beneath the years. I had been seen, held, chosen by them, and finally by myself. And if that's not a gift, I don't know what is. So, if you've ever been given a moment that didn't make sense until it changed you, maybe you've been here too. Maybe you've stood at the edge of something unknown and found yourself waiting for someone to walk in and hand you back to yourself.